welcome to Architrave Gaming. I'm the Archmaster. So good of you to drop by. Today we're talking about more world building ideas. Let's go. So if you've seen a few previous videos, you've heard about association magic, or association creation magic, or spontaneous creation of stuff because of association. You know, it's the idea that when the king is marching with his army, the universe looks at him and says, well, the king needs a castle and an army needs a barracks. So when they stop for the night, a castle just kind of spawns and the barracks just form because, well, they ought to be there, right? It's the universe looking at something and says, well, this should have that, and then it does it, right? You can start selling your wares on the side of the road, and the universe is like, oh, well, you're a merchant needs a stall, and so they just build you a stall, right? It just happens. So that can affect a lot more things than just people and kings and barracks and synthetic stuff, the man-made stuff. It can affect a lot more than that. You can say that whenever wood elves travel, they take the forest with them. Like if the wood elves move over here, a new forest spawns, and the old one dies, or maybe it stays there. Who knows what. Maybe back in olden days, the wood elves were actually the ones that spawned all the forests, and they were nomadic and they were traveling around, and then they left druids behind to caretake the forest and keep it alive so it didn't die. That's why we have druids everywhere, because each 100 square miles or 10 square miles, something, each section of every forest has to be tended, because if the druid leaves, it'll die unless you have elves there. So you either have elves in the forest or druids in the forest. If you have both, then it's a super tall forest, a mega forest, something like that. Anyway, I just came up with that. I think that's kind of cool. It explains where druids came from and why they have a job to protect nature and all that stuff. And it's applicable to deserts and snowy areas and every other place. A different type of elf can be a sea elf, a desert elf. The plants, the animals, the weather, all the stuff can follow them, and then they leave behind their own druids to maintain that. Anyway, the forest spawns from the druids. Whenever the dragon goes away, perhaps the weather stops, or the seasons stop, or maybe the dragons are in charge of the actual weather itself, the individual things like heat and snow and rain, and the giants are in charge of the seasons themselves, what grows, what dies, the overall settings, and then the dragons, wherever they are, the individual pieces of weather happen, right? The elements themselves, the magic innate to the elements might be tied to one or both of them, and maybe they compete and fight, and the dragons want to be in charge of an area, and the giants want to be in charge, and so they have to fight, and then one is in charge, and then the weather, the elements, the season, the magic is affected differently based on if a giant is maintaining it or a dragon is maintaining it, right? Lots of cool stuff. You can just do, this is a sovereign idea now. You can say anything spawns when something else is nearby. Or you can do the opposite and say something despawns, something dies, something falls apart, something decays when this thing is nearby. Say if you have a thief in your town, everyone's candle wicks burn out twice as fast. And so when everyone's candle, it's like, all right, there's a thief somewhere around here, right? You can say when someone has been murdered, then the sun doesn't shine, or you have an eclipse at noon every day until the murderer is found, or until he leaves the city, or until the victim is avenged, right? You can have so many things where if this happens, this other thing happens, or if this doesn't happen, then something happens, right? It's a broad idea. There's so much you can do with that idea. I could keep giving examples. My world, hopefully, Lord willing, one day I'll actually have a setting book. I'll have several that actually implement all these ideas in coherent ways. But right now, this is just you got here early. You got to Architrave Gaming early. You get to see the core ideas and do what you want with it for a while. This leads to something else though. The whole seasons and forests and whatnot. I thought the whole all the magic in the world is pretty much controlled by one of 3 or 4 things: time, space, and matter. Yeah, it's 3 things. Also people and items, but items are also matter. So I guess time, space, matter, and people. 4. That's also freedom, power, status, mystery. I won't get into that right now. Anyway, so who says that the seasons and the weather are in the hands of time? Who says that every 3 months a season changes? Why isn't it in the hands of matter, or the hands of space, or the hands of people? Let's switch things up. Let's make it fantastic. So what if there was a time before the seasons were in the hands of time, and it was instead in the hands of people? Maybe that's where the first druids were. and lots of ideas of where the first Druids came from, and you can have them throughout histories in different regions, and even in like different dimensions. I have like different layers of existence of the world. It's not a multiverse; it's within the same universe and timeline, but it's almost like different planets within each other, like different subdimensions. Anyway, the idea that what if Druids were actually in charge of the weather and the seasons? What if that was their first job? And so Druids were created because it's like, hey, the weather and the seasons are all over the place, or maybe they're tied to dragons and giants, and so let's kind of take that from them because they want to rule and abuse us. Let's actually take the ability, the leverage they have over us, like, hey, I'm a dragon, obey me, or your crops won't grow. There's probably some war or something, found a way to take that energy, and they're like, let's use it ourselves. And so no one really measures time, no one really cares much. I mean, a year, but how do you measure the year if the seasons are all over the place? Like you'd have to be an astronomer and actually measure the stars in the sun to know when a year was. Most people don't know, most people don't care, right? So that's interesting. That can be like an extra long or short age and no one really knows how long it was. That's cool. Like there's so many little world building tangents you can go on with this. But anyway, I think it'd be cool if each druid has the power of a single season, where it's like, here's the spring druid, the summer druid, the winter druid, the autumn druid, and maybe you can have more druids in an area than not, and so maybe there's more autumn in that place because they're pushing their season forward. There may be very wise druids who always go in a perfect rotation, or there may be one druid that always gets the short end of the stick. Maybe it's winter, and they're like, no one ever wants to let me do my thing, and everyone's like, well, it's because no one really likes you or your thing, and it's like, you can have all sorts of cool stuff within the druids, within the wood elves, the dragons, and the giants, and the mortals. It's like the mortals could like pay the druids. I don't know what kind of payment druids would take, but it's like, hey, spring, summer druids, and even autumn, harvest time. Can you like live with us permanently and like make our land in perpetual spring, perpetual summer, please? This can vary per region. The druids can come down and, like every 3 months or 6 months or however long they want, they can go in and be like, all right, I touch the ground, like they do a circuit and they cover the whole land, they make the whole thing spring, and then they leave, and 3 months later, the summer druid comes in and he takes his turn, right? There can be agreements that the humans have with these druids, like, hey, come and give us the seasons at these certain times, because that's how we like it with our crops, please, and skip winter, right? And winter comes in, it's like, if you leave me out for a few years, you're going to get a winter that lasts 10 years long. And it's like, okay, fine. You can have like 2 months out of the year. There's a lot you can do. I like the idea of challenging our fundamental assumptions about everything. So you can even go to what if the seasons and the weather, which are two separate things actually, what if they were in the hands of not time, or just happens because it's 3 months later, or people? What if it was in the hands of matter? So certain places, locations were always locked in a certain season, and so you had to actually move from place to place to actually experience the seasons. And so how does that even work with crops? You plant your crops in one spot, and then you need summer and autumn for them to grow. Like you can say that maybe it's earth elementals or the dwarves or the druids themselves that go in and they like take all the plants like underground and move it to another quadrant, and let it start getting sunlight there, and then it goes in and maybe like travels along the surface of the ground to the next place, and then that's when you can harvest it. You can challenge all the fundamental assumptions of nature and how everything works, right? And it can be really interesting. You can actually have a fantastic world. And of course, if this seems a little overwhelming and daunting, don't try to implement everything all at once. Just take the ideas that thrill you, that you like that is cool, I can't wait to implement that. Don't worry about making your world fantastic because mine is. It's like to each their own. I am kind of obsessed with making stuff as different as it can be from the world, because I find the world kind of boring, like at least in terms of fantasy. I don't want to look to the world for fantasy because it's kind of the opposite of what I'm going for. Anyway, YouTube pleasantries go a long way. That's the end of the video. Like and subscribe. I have a Patreon. I'm going to have a Discord server. I technically have it available. I just haven't linked it anywhere. And Patreon would be great because I'm trying to publish my own game system. I'm trying to work full time on this to actually give you all really cool stuff. Also, I have been spending the last 3 years scouring all of D&D and RPG YouTube to actually find every little bit of GM advice I possibly can and writing it down, cataloging it. I have oodles of words written of all the advice I could find over the last several years, right? And we've had a lot of good advice over the last few years, and a lot of it crosses over. This person says, hey, top 10 things to do to have immersion, top 10 things to do to have immersion, top 7 things, and there's crossover. So I collect all the different things and I distill it down to where they all agree, and I distill it down to a master list. And that's one thing I want to do. I can't do it right now because I'm working a job, but Patreon would help a long way if I can get financial support. I have so many things to offer in terms of, world building, my own game system, which is 5e but better, and like stuff like that, GM advice, and there's just a lot to offer. So anyway, support would be great. I've already gotten a lot of support from y'all, and I really appreciate it. Like and subscribe. God bless.